So that was my first time seeing that new branding, and I have to say that was cool. That was
Yeah,
really
that
cool.
was
So
that was
yeah,
awesome. The production value was good. I feel like I'm going on live TV right now. Like that was the news intro. It was amazing.
yeah, seriously. No, that was great. So shout out to the design team at Hasura. Great job there. That was a lot of fun. I am joined today by a very special guest. I mean, if you don't know who he is and who he represents, shame on you. But I'm going to go ahead and let Lee introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about yeah, what the company is, and we are going to have a fun show today.
Yeah. So hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Lee. I lead developer relations at Vercel, which is a platform that makes it really easy to deploy your front end of your application. And we're also the creators of Next.js, which is a front end framework, uses React. Check it out if you've never seen it before. But really excited to talk more today.
Yeah, I mean, Next.js has had some popularity as a project. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's been
some people
going
might have seen it.
It's been going well. It's been a busy last year with a lot of people discovering Next.js and trying it out and seeing the growth curve kind of grow exponentially. So it's a great time to be a React developer. It's a great time to be a Next.js developer.
I'm just curious because I just saw before the show went live, React actually released React 18 officially, like it's the stable branch now. So
Yep.
I'm just waiting to see what the issues will just start to just stack up on the Next.js, like
Yeah.
issues with React 18.
Yeah. There's whenever there's a new stable release with Next.js or with React, there's always that initial flood of people upgrading, trying out things, finding new bugs. And I feel like at least with Next.js, and I'm sure with React as well too, there's probably a quick patch release after because you get all that rush of community feedback and they help work through some of those initial bugs.
Fantastic.
But
Fantastic.
we've been working with the React team to try out 18 for a while now. So we've been working through the release candidates and the betas, and yeah, it's been a long process, but a great process because we've worked through a lot of that design together.
I mean, you could assume that they probably reached out, given the popularity of that project, to be like, this probably should work together when we go live because that
Yeah,
might cause issues. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
we've been yeah.
Good.
I was just gonna say it's exciting to think more into the future of React 18 and some of the more advanced features for doing server side streaming and taking advantage of suspense. Those are going to be enabled through some future improvements in Next.js as well too. So we'll talk more about that in a future stream.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. And I will totally admit, so like this is like the disclosure part, where you have to mention if you own crypto or whatever else. Like
Mm,
I am one of the biggest fans of of Next.js and of Vercel because like not only just I love the framework, I love the developer experience of Vercel.
mm.
So I will sound like I am a total fanboy to viewers of this show, and it's because I am, because it's like my stack. Like it's perfect for my stack. So there are many great tools out there to choose. Look at the ones that work best for you. This
Mhm.
happens to be one that has gotten me going pretty far for a long time. So that I want to just get that out there for the audience. I'm not being paid to be like as much of a fan of this platform as I am. I just have used it for quite a while, and it is a fantastic stack for what I build. So just want to get that out
Yeah.
there.
Well, I'm
But
glad you enjoy it. Appreciate that.
yeah, yeah. Today, we are going to show a new integration that is in the works. So it's not actually officially released yet. It's still kind of in a beta phase, but we have a Hasura plus Vercel integration where you'll be able to add us from the marketplace, and it will actually either create or connect to an existing Hasura project, where you'll then be able to get the Hasura admin secret. You'll be able to get the API URL, all of that automatically put into your environment variables inside of the Vercel hosting platform, which obviously connects really nicely with things like the next public URL. Because there's you could say Vercel and the Next.js ecosystem together, it's opinionated about environment variables, would probably be a nice way to put it. You have some very
Yeah.
specific thoughts about it, yeah.
Yeah. The way I like to think about it is, before Next.js, actually, I think the .env type environment variable standard was popularized. I think it really got popular with Create React App. So Next.js kind of embraced that and made it really easy for folks to add environment variables to their application, and then extended it a little bit with the next_public prefix, such that you can have it be really clear when you're exposing a value to the client side or using it on the server side. So especially when we start talking about databases, you might have different keys for different level of access. And if you're using a key that is supposed to be only for client side, it's nice that next_public makes it really clear the contract there between the developer and the application.
Yeah, and because you also have, I was an old Node person, but like, so .env was like obviously the first thing that you never check into your code repositories, but Vercel is like, or Next.js specifically says no, .env is for those globals that should be kind of common across deployments, and then the prefixing .local, .development, .production, those would be the ones that you would want to scope down for specific deploys, and that's where your secrets live. Has that been something you see a lot of people actually then embrace and go with, or is that something that's been more of a pushback? Or
Yeah, I think a lot of people go that route. We also hear from a lot of people who are self-hosting Next.js, and they're using a secret management tool like some of the things that HashiCorp provides, or they maybe they have their own homegrown environment variable tool to kind of manage the workflow of that. Because I'm trying to remember, what's the name of the HashiCorp tool for secrets? Vault. It's Vault. Yeah, a lot of teams use Vault too because they want to share those values across multiple projects potentially.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense, and it is something that you do need to be opinionated about, like if you want to standardize things across a whole bunch of things. So let's go ahead and have a look at sort of how the integration works. I do also have a bit of a sneak peek of some of the UI UX things. They're not polished UI yet, but there's some interesting pieces for us to have a look at there as well. But let's just have a quick look at the project here. I'm going to go ahead and show my screen here. I think what I'll do is I'll actually just go ahead and start up. I'll start this project locally, and we'll have a look at how this is actually intending to play out, and then we'll actually see about the process of migrating that to the web. So I'm going to share my screen. And so now we should have some lovely code here. Let's go ahead and bump some font sizes here and hide some of the cruft. And we're going to just have a look at roughly the structure of the repositories so we can kind of have an idea of what's happening under the hood. So if we look at the actual project here, we've got two top-level directories. We've got a Hasura metadata folder. I keep correcting myself because I was told that I say the name wrong. So I'm trying to unlearn a year of mispronunciation. And then we have the Next.js project sitting here at the root. And this is a basic TypeScript project. And the only thing that I did to add any sort of a wrapper, if you will, that's not standard, create next app sort of behavior, which again, they have a CLI, which again is awesome because it just speeds up your development and testing on new projects. But I added the CodeGen folder here. So CodeGen.yaml, which gives us then access to this lib folder. That's just a naming pattern I chose. So I get generated typings for my GraphQL endpoint. We've done some shows on GraphQL CodeGen on other libraries. So have a look at that. Like, we're not going to go into CodeGen. But essentially what it does, and I've used Urkel for this client, not React Query, which other shows you'll have seen that I've used React Query. And it's just because I wanted to get a really, really thin wrapper. So the only things we ended up adding to the basic Next stack is if we go to the pages directory, and if we look at the app, we have a very basic provider pattern inside of React here where we have a client created. And you'll see that we have that first example of that next_public environment variable that we've defined inside of .env.local, which is this endpoint right here. And in my case, it is pointing to the local running version of the local running version I have of Hasura. But then that endpoint will be populated by the integration on the cloud for our cloud project that we'll be able to bring in. So using that pattern, we have the simple provider pattern, and then we have the auto-generated hooks, which map to, so the use get items query is just a simple React query, React hook that is coming from our generated GraphQL client here. Underneath queries, right there, top level queries, get items.graphql, simple GraphQL query. And so the beauty about the TypeScript generation is it takes that query, creates a hook for it that Urkel is able to consume, and all I have to do is provide a pattern, and then I get a whole bunch of hooks that can automatically give me data. Like that's great with type safety and everything. So
Yeah.
so we like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I see in chat somebody is asking about if Vercel supports containers, and you do, right?
So in this instance of this project, your www folder, your Next.js app would be deployed to Vercel, and then your Hasura folder, we can deploy that to Hasura Cloud, right?
Yeah, that's what we're going to do in this project. But Vercel generally also supports containers, right? Or not yet?
Actually, no. So we're a serverless platform. So our underlying infrastructure, you don't deploy like a Docker container to it. For example, you can deploy like a Next.js app that's been adapted for serverless, which is just the default output of Next build that we read. Or we also have adapters for other frameworks too. So like 35 plus, I think, front-end frameworks you can deploy to Vercel with zero configuration. And we adapt it to work with a serverless environment.
And we're going to see that too, because because I've used the subdirectory of www, we have to identify where the code lives. And in that case, it actually it shows us a prompt to pick the framework. If it was at the root level, Vercel is smart enough to say, hey, this is an Next.js project and everything's crazy magical. But in this case, we'll just have to identify a couple of pieces to tell it where things should live. Yeah, so let's kind of jump into it. So you're going to see that I do actually like Vercel. Lots of little demos there. And that's not my only project that I have set up, like my only account that I have. So yeah, like I said, I'm a fan of the project. We'll go ahead and do a new project here, which we're going to be able to identify from my current Git account. And I will grab this this Dappy Vercel. You'll see when there's a project, obviously, if you have for the audience, if you have a root level Vercel project, it identifies it and says, hey, I know what that is. And so it'll pull it in as a Next.js project. But in my case, I'm going to use this Dappy Vercel example, Dappy being data and API show for the new viewers. Yes, I like acronyms. So when we bring this in here, we're going to go ahead and call this the Dappy Vercel live. And I'm going to have to identify the presets. So you'll see again, like, just insane. How many frameworks?
Bunch of frameworks here.
Yeah, how many frameworks your team supports? Crazy. Yeah. So we'll go Next.js, and then here we have to identify which folder we want it to live in. And here again, it's even identified so that, hey, I know how to read this folder of www, and it's able to see the structures. So good stuff. We'll go ahead and continue. And from there, we should be able to just go ahead and hit deploy. We could define environment variables right out of the bat. We could also modify the commands. In my typical flow, I always do my type generation locally, and I don't generate those on my server because I don't want to have any surprises between what was generated locally to what's generated on the cloud. There might be some people who have strong opinions other directions. I prefer not to do that. So
yeah.
So we'll go ahead and just take the default vanilla from that project and hit deploy on that. And we're going to see it's going to start to actually kick off deploy. And at this point, we're just going to wait for a couple of seconds for it to actually kick through. I'm using the hobby version, so I have to wait.
Actually, there's no, well, you did get queued here, which is interesting. But typically you would only get queued if, you had other multiple builds running at the same time, which in this instance,
I did run
surprised.
2 or 3 before this show as I was kind of testing out some workflows and some code. So it might be that I haven't rolled past the um, what do they call that, graceful timeout or whatever.
Yeah, interesting. Let me check.
I might have a permanent queue set on my account because I tend to abuse this pretty badly. But so while that's deploying here, what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up the URL for the Hasura account here so we can have a look at that integration.
Yeah, let's take a look.
So let's pop this in right there. So again, this is not the final form. This is a beta version as our teams have been going back and forth discussing functionality. We're going to have a very basic version that's functional today. If you were to try this out, it'll work. But the version that is coming in the next couple of weeks actually has like some really sweet DX on it. So we're going to have a good time with that. But basically, this gives you a couple of snippets of how this all should sort of look together, getting started with Hasura. And then we have some basic instructions on what to actually do. Specifically, it tells you which environment variables will get auto-populated into your Vercel project. The next public Hasura project endpoint, which is something that you need to be able to expose the project to the Next.js client. Then we get the Hasura project endpoint and Hasura admin secret added, which would be something that you'd probably use from something like a server-side request or something you'd run on an API endpoint of some sort, as far as I understand.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the integration for me is it essentially is simplifying the process of developers going from some code to getting live in production. And often when you start to build more complex applications, you're stitching together services. Your front end and your back end are decoupled. That's great, right? You have your Hasura cloud instance, you have your GraphQL API, and then maybe you have your Next.js front end. But the process of actually going from zero to production, the whole point of the integrations is to really simplify that process. So a little bit tactically, like diving more into what that looks like, you mentioned this a little bit at the start, but the integration will connect your accounts. So there's this OAuth flow of saying, hey, I have a Vercel account. Hey, I have a Hasura cloud account. Let's connect those two and make sure that they're authorized parties. Then we can say, let's set up a new instance on Hasura. Let's take the values, whether they're secrets or environment variables, send them back to Vercel, and then we can continue with the process. So maybe that's for the initial build, or maybe that's after we've already deployed. Then your project just immediately knows, hey, I can use these environment variables to connect to my services.
Yeah, exactly. And we're getting into a little bit of a territory here where I want to say the flash opinion alert. One of the things that I really like about Vercel, and one of the things that I really like about the Hasura ecosystem as well, is that they both are services that are solving their domain very discreetly, and entirely. So a lot of frameworks out there, you'll be able to see something like so a lot of the tools out there would be something that might try to solve some of the database side, some of the front end side. Think about traditionally WordPress, right? It does everything front to back. And a lot of Ruby systems were a lot of it same way. And where Vercel is saying, hey, we're like cloud native and we're serverless native, like we're going to solve this whole piece of the puzzle. And Hasura is like, we don't care about your front end, or what project you're running. Like, we're just going to solve your data part. And so being able to use these two different services and being able to orchestrate them with things kind of like, something, let's say, for example, we had a repository of a full stack project. We can deploy the Hasura metadata to Hasura. We can deploy the Vercel project to Vercel, and everything will just work. And not try to be crossing, in terms of taking over each other's pieces of the puzzle, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna pull open a link that you sent here. Because this is what happens when you do demos.
I
Yeah.
was like, why does that say queued? And then I checked and it looks like the builds are degraded right now. So maybe we can come back to this in 20 minutes and see if it's and see if it's
Yeah.
fixed.
So this is just live,
The demo gods were not on our side
The
today.
demo gods were angry. They were already a little bit frustrated with me earlier. So I can just see if I'm still queued. I am there. What we can also do, we can cheat
Mm.
because I I do have, and this is exactly everything that I had done.
Hmm.
What I did get earlier, like running that within a couple of minutes, was actually then the what
The dry run, probably the
yeah,
one
dry run,
before.
but that is showing.
Yeah, it looks like it's still
It's still
queued.
cute. It's still cute. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll skip that. So the dry run, which was because I do try to appease the demo gods from time to time.
Yeah.
This one actually was a running project that I was able to use that same flow and it worked right away. So apparently I broke Vercel for everybody. So I apologize for that. Um, but what's amazing about the Vercel stack too, because I tell you everybody, I'm sorry, I love this platform, is like deployment links and like branch links. Like if you've worked with as many clients and agencies as I have, being able to just deploy like a version of the site and just saying, yeah, here's the preview URL. It's amazing. Like it's just an amazing experience. So we have a running version of the website. Now this one will be broken because it's not actually pointing to any actual API. The variable is not populated yet. So it's basically trying to look for an environment variable that's not set for looking for code. If we look at the actual console here, we can see that the network error, which we should have, it might not even be fetching because it might even be broken just too much because it doesn't even have a URL to request. So
Hmm.
we need to populate that environment variable inside of our code to be able to get that next public. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and
Hmm.
add that Vercel integration, which will start off with the integration page here.
Hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and say, go ahead and choose a scope. So I'll use my my personal one here.
Hmm.
Go ahead and hit for a specific project, and we're going to choose the dry run project in this case, and we'll add that integration. And so it's going to now go over to Hasura Cloud. It's going to create a project for me, and it says, okay, that's great. I'm going to go ahead and install the integration.
Wow, that was fast.
Crazies. And so
We
now
should.
we have, what's that?
I was going to say we should open up Hasura Cloud and check out that newly created database too. Well, we
Yeah,
could
so let's
probably
go
look
ahead
at
and go
the.
to configure here. So now what we have is, oh
Wow,
man, I
that's
love
a
these names.
we we did not win the lottery there.
No,
At first,
we
it
didn't.
said torched, and that was even worse.
Torched is at least of the crimes implicated here.
Yeah,
Torching corgis is
we
probably
need. There needs to be
better,
some kind of deny list of certain words together.
right? Right. I had a actually somebody was using Hasura with Vercel, um, had come into our chat because they were actually had gotten um, Jackass in both projects, like
They're
in
like, is somebody
Hasura
playing a
and
trick
in
on me here?
Vercel, and he was just like, he's um, what are the odds
Yeah,
of getting? So
that's
yeah.
funny.
Anyways, funny. Artistic Shepherd was a nice one that I'd gotten just before this show. But we're gonna go ahead. We need to define a couple of important things here. You'll notice we have the little Vercel integration here, so that's all cool.
Oh,
We're going
that's
to go
nice.
ahead and go to settings, and we're going to go and modify a couple of quick things here. Specifically, we need to add a unauthorized access role. And so in this case, we're going to just name a special role that when we do not get any content or we get no headers, we're going to assume the anonymous role coming into Hasura, which allows us to be able to choose our own adventure a little bit when it comes to content authorization. With that in place, now we're going to go ahead and actually add a database to it. So we'll launch the console here.
Nice.
And we're going to go to data, We're going to go to create a free Heroku database here. I hope I've been saying Heroku correctly for the last 15 years. Maybe I've been saying that one wrong too.
That was pretty easy to make your database here. That was nice.
Yeah, it's a really nice experience. So data source is added, very nice. And here
and is that
we
a
actually
free
have
tier Heroku database? Yeah.
free tier.
Yeah. Nice.
Which if you have as many free tier Heroku databases as I have now at this point, you do need to add a credit card on file to go
like,
beyond
what is
like
this
the
guy
8,
doing?
right? Like, oh, he's DevRel, these guys.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have the public here and everything set up. What I'm going to do now, so now it's my turn to have an issue, is that the metadata that I was going to apply from that repository had a small bug. I think I have a divergence between my local version of the Hasura CLI. I'm not going to bore all of you with debugging that live. So what we're going to do is actually just quickly bootstrap the Hasura project to look like what I had set up locally, using the same migration statements that were generated by the Hasura project. So I'm going to actually just copy the SQL statements that Hasura generated locally, and we're going to paste them in here instead of creating the tables by hand. So to do that, I'm going to actually delete all these there. We're going to head back over to the code editor, go to the Hasura metadata, drill down to migrations, and just like, don't freak out, people. Like, seriously, this is not something that I do. Like, this gets made for you automatically by the tool. Like, you don't have to use this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab, I believe I need the first create table public item, I suppose. I think it's going to be we're going to try it. We're going to see if it works. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to just rebuild it by hand, because also not hard. So we're creating the table. We're creating the function that we would need. Let's go ahead and see if that actually will let us run. Looks like that one ran just fine. Nice. We're going to go ahead and grab the next SQL file. So now we're creating the public bucket. Looks like that one ran just fine. I always get excited when SQL statements actually execute. Yeah. So I had a couple of renames here.
As you're walking through this, kind of talk me through the different migrations. So you were building this locally, you were making some alterations to your schema, and Hasura automatically generated the migrations for you, such that if you needed to rerun the state of things, it would get you back into the specific schema state you were in.
Exactly. So in this case, you can see that I changed my table name from a capital item to a lowercase item. And that gets tracked as an individual migration with both an up and a down statement. And that allows us to be able to really fully play back all changes that we would have run to our production environment. And then these migrations allow you to actually check these into a repository that actually will then work. So now I'm down into the actual inserting content. So I will just do that real quick. I may run into a constraint issue here. I'm not sure. We might have to just do that manually, but that seemed like that played just fine.
Another thing, just to check my understanding as you're doing this, is the reason for the up and the down scripts is that if for some reason in the process of executing all of these different migrations and one failed, it would actually stop and then go backwards and run all the down scripts and walk backwards from all the changes you've done.
Right, yeah. And you can also up and down the migrations locally as well, if you chose to want to do that just by yourself as well. So this should have now replayed everything to the, I think I had, okay, yeah. They should now replayed everything the way that I'd had it before we left off. We can see, just to kind of hammer home that point a little bit, if I were to be running this locally, and I'm going to go ahead and close down the sidebar. So I'm inside of the Vercel directory. I'm going to navigate inside of the Hasura repository. If I just do a quick check on Docker, we'll see that I have a running instance of the Hasura engine, and I have running Postgres. If I were to go ahead and actually play back here a couple of commands to the Hasura console CLI command, because I put in the local secret as plain text. I may have to write it by hand. Here we go. So Hasura console admin secret, my admin secret. When I run that, what I get out of the box is I get this proxied version of the Hasura console running at 9695. And everything that I would do in here, so if I were to just quickly make another table, just for making a table, if I go ahead and call this order, and I just give this a simple ID that increments, and I go ahead and add that table. Now, when I go and I look at that directory again locally, we can see that it will have now added an additional migration that's not yet in my repository, where I've actually created a new table called order. And so every behavior that I do that I'm tracking inside of the Hasura console with this proxied version of the interface generates these migrations for me automatically. So whether it be actual migration statements or even the metadata of the actual application. So you can see here that I've added a new table called public order. It's not a tracked thing. What's that?
How did that work? How did it actually put the files back on your local machine?
So that was the localhost version. That was the version that was running locally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. For a second there, I was like, wait a minute. Did the cloud version send those files back? Yeah.
Now you can use the CLI to pull the metadata down and be able to do that as well. But so what we got to do real quick, because I basically have essentially a database here that is, I think probably the metadata might actually be tracked already from the permissions. Let me just check here. I have the data. And then, so everything's already checked. If in most cases, if you have a database from scratch, like you've done SQL, not inside of Hasura, you'll need to just track those tables and then assign the relationships. But it's automatically out of the box here. So we have our data model. What that allows us to do now, this is not the right project. This is still the localhost one. So if I go here now to public, there we go. I have to track all of these buckets here, or all of these tables that I just added. This is what I was just describing. So we'll go ahead and track all these tables. And then we're going to go ahead and, one of the viewers here is saying that I should have run a migration squash. That is true. That is a now stable feature. When I joined, it wasn't a stable feature. And so I was a little bit hesitant around squash, but migration squash now with the console actually squishes that all down flat. So appreciate that call out. We'll see that I've tracked the tables now, and I can go ahead and track all the relationships because they're in the foreign key relationships. And so now all of our data should be pretty much hooked up for production. And with this, with all this data being handled on the Hasura side, if we go back to our Vercel project, we should see that now if we come here, let's see if it's now actually connected with the data.
We probably
new
need
deploy.
To deploy. Yeah. To populate those. We might be okay now. Let's give it a shot. If we go to deployments. Right.
So we're going to go ahead and go to deploys. And just for grins, what I want to do, because I can do it from local, I'm going to just grab my code here. It appears that Visual Studio Code just crapped out on me. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and actually just take this now and just to push a new branch up real quick, which should trigger a deploy automatically because I have the CI/CD flow in Vercel. So I'm going to add all. The other live demo problem is apparently you aren't able to type when you are doing demos. And once I get commit m, adding more tables, and then we'll just push that up, but that's going to push up everything, which will trigger the actual deploy across over to Vercel. So we come down here, we can see within a couple of seconds, this is the dry run.
Yeah, you can go.
So here's the
click on there.
queued. Yeah, so it's queued at the moment. We'll see if it kicks out of queue here.
You want to click on that on adding more tables, I think. Let's see. Nothing yet.
Let's take a look over here. Let's refresh the page.
Still delayed. Bummer. That is a bummer.
That is actually pretty funny. Trying to think of what's a good way to show.
Well, we can start talking through.
Well,
the
we
code
can look
while
at the. We should be able to look at the settings to see that environment variable populated. If it's not,
yeah, let's do that.
So we go back to the root level here to the dry run, and we go to where settings, right?
Settings.
So if we go over to our environment variables, we should see down here now that we have the 3 Hasura environment variables added, which that's actually already a very, very, very helpful step to just be able to have that all be automatic and connected across like that. I'm going to just go ahead and show the API there. So we have our touched corgi. And then we have the endpoint again, which is just listed as the Hasura project endpoint, again, which we would use from something like the API endpoint. So that integration, you can see just how much time that would actually save somebody to be able to just say, I'm not going to even really worry about my secrets. I just set the one locally, make the password, push it up. And then when I push up my repository, what I would do on the Hasura side is I would come into here. Again, I'm not going to do it right now because it's not working, or I'll do it. A broken deploy is not going to affect the production environment. If I go ahead and I auth into it with GitHub here, I just tell it to close down, and it'll automatically pick up. I can come into my repositories on this side, similar flow like we did at Vercel. I can come into my the same repository that I'm tracking. I'll be tracking the main branch. And I'll go to the Hasura folder. And let's make sure that it's just the same root level. And then I go ahead and I say deployment mode automatic. And we'll go ahead and say set up Git deployment. Then basically now whenever I would push any changes, whether it be the metadata or anything else, I would get that metadata updated in my Hasura Cloud project, which has the auto-connected environment variables over to Vercel. And then anything that I've changed in my Vercel project would be updated to the Vercel Cloud. And it's just amazing to be able to work that way.
Nice. That's awesome.
We got a user question here. Would you recommend having metadata databases separate from the actual database we use to store user data? So in this case, well, so the cloud projects, the metadata is stored in a Hasura Cloud Hasura Cloud owned database that we maintain, but locally we store them in the same version. Maybe that answers your question.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at the Vercel deploy here. See if we got lucky here.
Yeah, maybe it's if you go up to deployments, we can take a look. Nope, still nothing. Well, should we pull up the code and take a look? Talk through what's happening?
Yeah, we certainly can, because at the end of the day, that actually is still basically the same experience we'd be having. So I just want to have a look here. We can also run locally. Yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and have a look at the code, because I think we're probably not going to be able to get the deploy up. I think that the Vercel, the deploy for my metadata also, did it go through? Not deployed. I had the deploy button, yeah. But I don't expect that to work because it was not working earlier. Something in my metadata locally. All right, let's have a look here. So I'm going to go ahead and just zoom out 1 or 2 levels here. And inside of the WW project, we're going to go ahead and run that. And let's actually start with looking at what that command is actually running, right? Because if we go to the actual start command, explain to us a little bit what's actually happening when we run next dev.
Yeah. So when you run Next.js, that's going to start up your local development server on localhost 3000. You can optionally pass in -p if you want to do a different port and port 3005 or something. And that allows you to run locally. And we have this different set of optimizations that we make locally versus in production. So when you're running locally, you want, let's say you have 10,000 pages in your application, right? You don't want to have to wait and build all 10,000 of those pages before you can pull up your server and go to your index page. So when we're locally, we take a more lazy approach than when we're doing a production build where we actually might need to go through all of those pages and generate some files. So that helps make the server start up really fast and have fast refresh as well too. So fast refresh enables you to hit save when you're in your editor and then just immediately see those updates shown in the browser while also preserving component state if you had any.
And like that's not just marketing speak in terms of how fast those updates are. Let's go ahead and pull this up here real quick. Because I have a very bare bone demo, like I mentioned. So we have the number 1.
Nice.
But let's say we wanted to go ahead and put that inside of like an H1 tag instead of the paragraph tag that I have here. So if I were to update that to an H1 tag, like that's how fast it goes.
Yeah.
And if you've worked with
Very
other
helpful.
tools, even modern tools, it is a standout in how fast that actually works, which is just an amazing experience, really. Um, One of the things I personally like too, and I actually had to use it for debugging this project, is running next builds locally, because then you can
Yeah.
actually simulate what would be the build environment. Because I had an error, and I guess I can't imagine that I had never had this error in my code before, but there is some sort of like an ESLint rule now or something that basically will catch if you don't include the key property on an
Oh yeah.
iterable inside of React.
Yep.
I think that might be new
Um,
or
it,
newer.
yeah. So create next app when you scaffold out this new
Mm.
project. It includes ESLint by default. You can of course remove it if you'd like, but with ESLint we have a pre-configured setup that includes linting rules for React as well too. And yeah, one of those ESLint plugin React rules is to ensure you use keys in arrays, iterating over arrays.
Yeah. So I got an error when I was trying to deploy, and I couldn't quite see what it was. And so then I did it locally and saw what the problem was and was able to do that. But that saves you from getting queued by testing your
Yeah.
fix and putting and waiting to see if the cloud errors on you. So that's a very helpful part of the flow. Maybe so. I'm still trying to think of what we can show off while we're waiting for deploys to go through. I would say maybe one thing worth noting for people would be potentially the instance of where we would use the non-next public environment variables. So from our environment status, if I go back to the Vercel project to grab just the names of the environment variables that were chosen, if I go to settings here and I go down to the environment variables, let me just make this a bit bigger here again. So we go down to environment variables and we just grab some of these names here. For example, the Hasura project endpoint. That's
Oh,
one
do you
that
want
we.
to pull these locally?
Oh yeah, we could do that too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
let's do
do
that.
that. I haven't done
Pull
that in
up.
a long time. So
Yeah.
tell me the magic here, and I haven't done that in
So
forever.
yeah. So do you have the Vercel CLI installed? You can
I
run
do. I don't know
Vercel.
what version of it.
Why don't you do Vercel -v or
Oh, I just spelled Vercel for one, but I may not have it installed then. So is that
Okay,
just a
so let's
global
do
install?
yeah, you can do yarn global, or you could do
Yarn global,
npm
right?
I.
Yarn global Vercel.
I
Yarn
know the
global add.
npm one. Oh yeah, I think
Yarn
it is global
global
add.
add Vercel. No, I trust Vercel. I'll install that as a global.
Yeah.
You guys pin your npm versions, right?
Yeah. So once this is installed, you should be able to run Vercel link inside your, yep. And what that's going to do is actually link this project. So you can say, yes, I want to set up this. So this is on your personal account. There is an existing project, yes. And the project is called, what was it called?
Something dry
Chappy
run.
Vercel dry run. Yeah.
Yeah. That. Ooh, did I hyphenate that or no?
Yeah, it looks like you did.
I did.
Cool. So
Nice.
now it's linked, and you can do a VC env pull, and then the next, well, this will pull it into a .env file, which is fine. You could also specify if you want .env.local, but it depends on how you want to manage your secrets. Because if you have secrets inside that file, you might want to exclude .env entirely from being committed to source code. So sometimes folks have their git ignore set up where it's only .local is excluded, but they commit their .env because they have, a non-secret. So they might have an environment variable, but it might not be a secret, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because that's what we have with the next public URL. So
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'll go ahead and overwrite my local one because I know what I know how to write localhost locally. So now we have the .env.local file, which I'm going to go ahead and ignore and not open up in front of y'all. But inside of .env, we have now a whole bunch of, let's say, populated ones as well. I'm going to go ahead and delete these real quick because it's going to show the environment variables that I just pulled down as secrets. So I'm going to rerun that real fast so I get kind of a fresh copy of. I don't even want to pull because I don't want anything from remote to be local. I
So
just want to use.
yeah. So that was right. What was in there? It also pulled in some system environment variables for you. You can see down at the bottom are the ones you added, but it also included some of those system values.
I don't want that to be in there. So these are fine. What would be the right flow there where because the .env is ones that I want to have be checked into my repository and according to the Vercel flow.
Yep.
And so if I wanted to pull down, like for example, these Git informations but not pull down like the secret ones, what would be the way to do that?
So typically the way I do it is I use .env.local for everything, and then I have a git ignore for all of the .env. So I actually don't commit anything to my repo with .env usually, unless it's like really not a secret. So in this instance, you could just put it all in .env.local if you would want to.
Because the right way would be to have, or theoretically would be to have, well, even this one should live inside of .env.local because it differs depending on if I'm in local or if I'm in deployment. So in that case, I would even just remove that one too.
Yeah, you can probably just ditch that file and just keep using .env.local.
Oh, bye. Yeah, so then inside of .env.local, and I don't care if people see the secret's gonna get out anyways. I'm gonna go ahead and just put this back to localhost here, and I'm trying to remember what exact string was against that there. Yeah. So now I have my local version of the thing, and the actual admin secret is also incorrect. Did I call that? Let me check my compose file here real quick. So my local version here is just called my admin secret key.
Nice.
Very, very secure. And then we had the Hasura admin secret will not ever be accidentally exposed to the client because it's not available, because it's not prefixed with Next public. However, the Hasura public project will be, as well as Hasura project endpoint. And so if I were to just take this and use both of those here, now my local environment is set up to iterate on and work with the way that I would expect. I'm just checking that Vercel status page real quick. Looks like builds.
You should be able to run a yarn dev inside your Next.js app and run this against your local instance now. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it looks
well,
like
I was just testing
loaded.
to see if I could look at the actual client, but this looks like it.
Yeah.
.amp.local got loaded, so it should be running just fine. If we go back to the actual page here, that's the live version. Here's the local version, yeah, and that's working as expected.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty slick flow. If we were to, I'm trying to think if there's anything else worth demoing here. Most of the people have seen everything else that we normally showcase. We could show iterating on adding, some more Hasura data.
How does that hook work? It's in index.tsn.
Yeah, let's do that. So here I have this GraphQL data, right? So I'm going to go to the queries, and inside of here, if I look at Hasura here, let's go to the local version here. I'm going to make sure I'm running my my proxied console. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just switch these to full screen now, so we can kind of have a look around a bit. I'm going to go ahead and turn on. You'll see that, like, from the relationship side, if I wanted to pull in like the buckets that the items are related to. So I'm going to go ahead and go to item, and I'm going to grab the ID of the item, and I'm going to go ahead and do the bucket items. Grab the item there, or the ID there, and then I'm going to grab the actual specific bucket that it's a part of. So here I've got kind of a full query, with my admin secret in place. I have full authorization to query this content. And let's say I want to actually be able to surface the bucket ID along with the ID on my page, or I can even just we'll make this be a bit more explicit here. We'll say bucket items. We'll do it this way. It's fine. Okay, so we have it like this. I want to go ahead and add this query information to my existing GraphQL query that I'm running. Now, if I go back and I try to add that, we're going to have a problem, and that is because I don't actually have permission to view that in this scope. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. When I go back to index, we'll see the first issue is that I don't have that data available on scope. So if I were to say, ID here, and then I wanted to grab something like a bucket, there's no concept of where this is. There's no other data except for ID, because that's what I had on my initial query. So what I have to do first is I have to try to rerun the GraphQL code gen. I just see a notification that the builds they found the problem and they're currently processing the queue. So I can only imagine how much stuff's in the queue right now at Vercel. I'm going to go ahead and run run code gen, which just reads my data, and it's going to error on me, or should error on me, because it doesn't error, but it's not going to give me the data because it doesn't have access to it. So now if I go to the to try and look at what's in scope here, I should not be able to get access to bucket. I do. Why am I getting access to that? Well, let's try. I actually no. I have access to it because my schema is aware of it because I'm using on my GraphQL code gen. When I'm checking my schema, I'm passing in the secret, so it's fully aware of everything I have available. However, when I go to request this data from bucket items, and I'm going to go ahead and just say something like bucket items.length here, it's going to error because it's not allowed to ask. It doesn't have permission with the anonymous rule. So I go bucket items.length. It's going to throw a problem at me because it's going to say, hey, you don't have access to that data. I have to restart the server too. That also helps. And also just so we can kind of see what's happening when we run that code gen. I close down my terminal here. There we go. If we look at the code gen file in our lib there, what's getting generated by the code gen command is this huge types file. So it gives us the typings for our entire GraphQL endpoint, which becomes a really helpful bit of data to work with. But the problem, and one of the things that the Urkel plugin for CodeGen gives us is at the very bottom, we get this use get items query that's automatically passing in the query document that we were looking at. So it's a super great development experience. Now we should have that error now, which I'm expecting. Yeah. So if we look at the error, we'll see that basically it's saying that I don't have permission to, or it's not able to see that field. So it's saying, hey, this whole bucket items thing, we have no idea what you're talking about. And so now if I go to Hasura and I say on this this track metadata, now I go to my data and I go to bucket item and I go to permissions and I go ahead and use my anonymous role here. I'm going to go ahead and say select. I'm going to say you can go ahead and without any checks, you're able to access all the items there. So I save that permission. Now when it's making that fetch against the server, it'll actually allow me to iterate over that data. In theory, oh, that's the wrong. I'm going to close down this tab here because it's
the local one.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and go here and let's see what the concern is now. Go to the network tab. So it gave me the. Oh yeah, because I'm still requesting the whole query is still requesting more data. So the bucket as well, I don't have permissions for. So the entire query, not just what I'm trying to read off of, the entire query is going to have issues. So if I come here as well, open up buckets as well with select, I'm going to go ahead and say without any checks as well. Save that, and then now when we come into the into our query, we should be able to access that data. And there we see, one item and one bucket. So I mean, that's the iteration process. And now if we wanted to deploy that live, we would just go ahead and say, push that up. And if I had my metadata CI/CD set up on the Hasura side, it would actually go ahead and deploy this metadata change because I was making those permission changes with the console. It pushed those up to Hasura Cloud, and it would push all of this front end changes over to Vercel. And literally have gone from local to live in about 4 to 5 minutes. We can have one last check here to see if our deploy went through here. We go ahead and have a look at the deployments. Hey, so if we have a look at this deploy here, in theory, if I have a look here to see, let's see what the issue is there. So it's not actually making a call. Let's just see why that is real quick. So I'm on my dry run. I'm going to go to the main page here.
Mm-hmm.
Close down some of the other tabs here. So now we get into the interesting part. So it's not showing me any requests going out, which is interesting.
You're also filtered by GraphQL in the search.
Okay, so here we go. So we got
nice.
Why do we have a CORS error?
Do we need to have allowed domains that we can request from on the Hasura side? Like we can only maybe localhost is allowed by default, but then we need to opt in the .vercel.app domain.
I didn't think so, but what I'm wondering, we can have a quick check. I know we have some areas where that is. Let's go ahead and have a quick check. Domains. Because that's not usually needed to have any domain. What I was just wondering is if the
It looks like someone commented in the chat about GraphQL CORS domain. I don't know if that's a real environment variable that you can use to allow specific domains.
That would be news to me, which is not unbelievable. Let's have a quick Google on that.
They could be just messing with us too.
It could be. Could also be a coworker who's coming in to save the day. So there is
one. Nice. So maybe inside of your Hasura
environment
config,
variables.
Yeah.
This would be a new one to me. I will have learned something.
That's what we're here for.
So that's what we're here for. So we're going to go ahead and go to new environment variable. I need to also spell it correctly.
Oh, we have it already. It's in there by default. Look at that. Interesting. And it already has star. Interesting.
Well, we can like just tell it like that we want it to be this one. I suppose.
You would think. Well, you would think with star it should allow everything.
You would think, yeah.
You never know, though.
You never know. Now, with CORS domains, do you need the protocol? You need the protocol, right? I think you need the protocol.
Probably.
Let's try it. Let's see what happens here. So we've just updated that. We're going to give it a second to populate. But I am unsure as to why. Maybe stars block my browser. The only thing that would potentially be interesting there is I have a plugin that does some weird stuff.
Classic CORS errors.
Right.
This has been it's been an adventure of debugging.
Yeah. I'll admit this one is new to me. Trying to think of what else. The only thing I was wondering about would just be if the Urkel client needed to have like secure or something set. Is the only thing that I'm wondering. That's all server side stuff.
I'm not sure.
Yep, I am not sure either. Firefox shows course problems more reliably than Chrome. I would be having to find out if I actually have Firefox installed. I'm just going to go ahead and go to a clean environment here real quick, which it seems like it's still the issue. But yeah, what we're going to do, I'm going to wrap it up because we showed basically how all this stuff works. I do want to throw one last thing at you all today, and that is have a quick look at the new Data API landing page where we have all of our upcoming shows now. So you can find everything on there, be able to check out what's coming up. Next month,
Nice.
whole month of looking at the Hasura super app and actions very specifically. So if you're into building actions or e-commerce applications, it's going to be a fantastic show with a new coworker, Anjana. It's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely check this page for updates. Lee, I know you are a super busy guy, so I really appreciate you being there today. I'm going to have to go ahead and call it here because I'm over my time with you anyways. So thanks again. And yeah, let us know where to find you on the Twitters, and then we'll wrap it up today.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me. You can find me on Twitter at LeeRob with 3 E's because somebody stole the other one. But this was fun. It was a good adventure, and I learned something new today. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. All right. We'll catch you all next time on next Tuesday, and have a great rest of your day.